This property was offered at one time, not the entire part, but a lot of that steep part originally when the Grove was originally going through the preliminary plat. At that time, this was not on our agenda as far as that kind of a park. It wouldn't have worked, I don't think, as a, your regular kind of park. But like I said, timing wise, I just happened, Dave was sick, so I took a tree commission meeting, and they started talking about edible forest, and then a couple days later, then I get a call that said, hey, how about this piece of property? And I don't know, it just like, boom, it was huge. And I think just this is a good deal.
Other questions for Jim?
Dwight, the other places that have edible forest, I'm in favor of this transaction, but in terms of monitoring the harvest of the edibles that grow there, how do people deal with that so that when you have a higher valued crop, say there's a bunch of blueberries there, somebody doesn't go harvest all the blueberries and leave none for someone else? How do you police that in the other communities?
Well, like I was saying earlier with that, we don't know those answers yet. We haven't planned that far, and we didn't even have the property yet. But we definitely will, because I think that is a big possibility. It's more of a likelihood that something like that would happen without something to work it. I just don't know. But
you haven't talked to anybody else, another community that has one of these, and seen the issues that come up already? And
I have not talked to them, no. I've looked at their websites. There's a new one in Seattle area, and I just haven't gotten that far with the planning part. And I'm sure that's just one of a multitude of things that we'll have to look at. And I mentioned earlier about the near-term planning and the long-term planning. A walnut tree you plant, and I don't know how many years before it starts producing some fruit, but it'll be a lot more years than a blueberry plant. And or maybe they'll put some ground cover that would be edible, strawberries, things like that. Just as a little side note, in the last position that I had in Kansas City, we had a pathway that was just like Paradise Path, where it ran along a creek side. Well, this is Kansas City area, a little more humid. Things grow a little differently there than they do here. But Home Depot donated just a truckload of all these old plants that they didn't get sold before the frost came. And a lot of them were grapes and blackberries and some plants that you really don't want to plant. But our public works guys planted a bunch of these just various places along that creek, and it was like a jungle in there to start with. Now you have wild grapes 30 feet up in the air and bur oak trees, and it's just a big place for people to take pictures of all the birds and things like that. This is downtown, deep downtown type of Kansas City area, so it's not like the wilds, but you wouldn't know it going through there. And so, I don't know. It was just exciting to see that happen over the years, and it's still there, and I hope they didn't plant the blackberries, but I envisioned this having a lot of those opportunities as well.
Brandy.
I'm glad you brought that slide up, actually. So
I'm going to burn that slide after this meeting.
I won't hold you to that exact yellow line, but the portion to the south and east of the red there, do you envision that having any utility, that whole skinny, steep part?
Well, probably not. These lines that you see here, those are, help me out with terminology, Bill.
Contour lines?
Contour line.
No, they're not contour, they hold the mountainside in place.
retaining walls?
Retaining walls, yes, I'm sorry. And so we likely won't mess a lot with that area. It's possible we could have some little walking areas to go through it, but as far as actually digging and things like that, we probably won't. Talking to Les McDonald earlier today, probably the best we'll be able to do as far as anything significant would be right in here. And if it's possible, that's where we would likely have a water booster station. But at the same time, I'll go back to what I'd said earlier. We haven't done all the planning for this of what kind of plants would go there. So there could be more that we could do with that and still maintain that hillside. I don't want to create something that's also a fire hazard that'll rush up toward the houses up there. So
Could it be possible that if we did the exchange, we don't want responsibility for that part?
well,
would
that
cut that part out?
matter of fact, that's why that line is there. When I originally put this together, I really wasn't interested in that property. I just saw issues. But running it through the 3 different commissions, talking it over with other staff and some arborist type folks, unless you actually went in to do some changing of what's there, it's a nice piece of property. It doesn't hurt us any, and it also protects the vision as you go into the park from the east. And it's possible that along, I don't know how thick those are, but I mean they're probably 2 feet maybe, these wide, these retaining walls. It could be possible that there's a pathway that it might not be ADA accessible, but a walkable pathway that could link down here as well.
Well, that's where you're, all along that roadway, you're going to be parking all the way up there and even some on the other side. So some type of a path from that end of that snout up would make sense.
Yeah, and this would be our primary entryway that would go into the booster station. Up in here would likely be where the shelter would be, restroom facility, and then the pathways. And I have no idea at this moment how those would really go.
Well, well, you know, Dwight, I think you could do all of what is till you're blue in the face. But
Yes.
what we're really trying to figure out is, do we want to do this land swamp, not all the intricacies of what may or may not happen, because that's just kind of guessing right now, some of that anyway. So I don't think we need to go any more detailed on that. I think you've done a great job at telling us